It's the Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent. We've been talking about this all week. Money is getting tighter and tighter. The cost of life can be even more daunting if you have kids. Children are expensive. Diapers, food, clothing, and so much more. We don't have paid family leave in Michigan, but a public-private partnership has tried to ease the cost burden. RX Kids provides unrestricted cash to mothers who are at least 16 weeks pregnant or to guardians who have a child who is 6 months or younger. It began in Flint 2 years ago. Now, RX expanded to dozens of communities across Michigan. So what have the impacts been for moms and kids? And why is RX Kids popular among people and across places that span the political spectrum? Nusrat Rahman is the economic mobility reporter at the Detroit Free Press and Bridge Detroit. She joins me now. Nusrat, welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me.
So first off, in what ways has RX Kids been most impactful for new moms and families?
That is a great question. So I've been reporting on RX Kids since it started in Flint 2 years ago, and I've gotten a chance to talk to moms before the program started in their community, while it's operating, and as they kind of get off of the program, moms from the Upper Peninsula, moms in Flint, and moms in Detroit. And so recently I talked to 4 moms for a story we did ahead of Mother's Day about what this program has meant for them. And first I'll zoom in a little bit. What those moms told me is that it helped them just feel stress-free. You know, a lot of them have newborns. Well, most of them have newborns. They have children. They have little kids. Some of them are working. Some of them are taking a bit of a break from work. And they said, you know, it gave them breathing room. It gave them time to spend, you know, with their children, to focus on themselves, to pay bills that may have gotten behind. The main takeaway is that it was that cushion for them during a pretty vulnerable time. And if we zoom out, we can see that most moms who are enrolled in the program across the state used the money on the basics, from diapers to food and all of the little things that you need for a little kid when you welcome them into your life.
Wow. Okay, Nusrat, what I'm hearing from you right now is that your reporting bore out this truth, something we've been talking about a lot this month for Mental Health Month, and that is how much the cost of living and finances can be this mental burden. So for these moms, this was a peace of mind. It was taking care of the basics and therefore allowing them to have more mental bandwidth to think about their kids, to think about life.
That's exactly what one mom was telling me. You know, she said that the program, yes, it helped her, you know, buy diapers and do all of these, you know, cover all of these expenses that she had, but it also allowed her to spend time with her baby. You know, she had 2 other kids before the one that, you know, she recently had and where she had the RX Kids money. But she was able to go to like baby and me classes and just have that mental clarity. And that can be a pretty vulnerable time, as we know, with like postpartum depression. And at a time when affordability is on the minds of so many Americans, she was like, this just gave me time to spend with my baby. And that to her was the biggest takeaway.
Was that mom or any of the others you spoke with surprised by how much RX Kids helped them? Yeah,
well, a lot of the moms I talked to said that it's not anything that they ever anticipated. So they were very grateful for the support that they had. You know, some of them were behind on their bills because they weren't working because they were pregnant. Others were struggling to find jobs and working gigs like DoorDash or Instacart. You know, one mom I talked to, one of the points that she made was so salient to me. She said, I did everything that you're supposed to do. I went to school, I got a degree, you know, I have good credit, but I still can't afford anything. She was looking for a job. She almost had a job and then she didn't end up getting it. And she was like driving between places, trying really hard to find a job. And she was like, this is just that cushion while I look for other jobs, right? So a lot of the moms were like, this is that like safety net for me while I try to get my life on a better track.
A safety net and a way to remove some of the shame that folks are feeling when it feels just tough to get by. I want to think about the phenomena of this, of RX Kids, because it's gone from being in one city 2 years ago to being in more than 60 communities across Michigan. How has it been able to spread so fast?
Yeah, so RX Kids, as you mentioned, started off in Flint in 2024, and now it's in more than 40, and it's going to be in total, it's going to be in more, roughly it's like 60 communities by this summer. And a big part of it is a braided approach to funding, from what I understood from my reporting. So, they got $250 million from the state last year in the state budget. They have a lot of local philanthropic support from across the state, whether that's in Flint or in Detroit. So philanthropy has really tapped in, and that's what's able to make them universal. So it has no income requirements. And also it has to be buy-in from the community. So whenever they make announcements for a community, it has to, they need to have at least 2 years of support. So a lot of it is buy-in from the community and, of course, state and private funding. And, of course, Dr. Monahanna is leading the effort as well. So I think there is, of course, that's kind of, a big portion of it as well.
We had Dr. Monahanna on the show. She's, again, the architect of this program, as you mentioned. Let's listen.
For so long as a pediatrician, I have wished the ability to go into my doctor's bag and prescribe an antidote to poverty. Poverty is a pathogen. It makes kids sick and it impacts their entire life course trajectory.
So pediatrician Dr. Monahanna sees her program, RX Kids, as an antidote to poverty. That's a really powerful notion. Talk about who Dr. Monahanna is and why fighting poverty is so important to her as a physician.
So Dr. Monahanna, as we know, is one of the leaders who helped expose the Flint water crisis. And when I talked to her and Dr. Luke Schaefer, who's with the city of Detroit now, previously with Poverty Solutions at U of M, he's one of the co-founders of the program. When I talked to them early on, they mentioned that poverty is rooted in a lot of things that are happening in a family's life, right? Poverty is rooted to housing instability. It's rooted to being unable to afford groceries, and so they talked a lot about what happens when you're able to provide cash in hand to at least alleviate some of these challenges that you're facing. And so I would say a big part of my conversations with both of them early on was being able to provide cash in hand to families at that stage when, families are very vulnerable.
Do you think RX Kids has also been able to expand because we in Michigan are connecting these dots more to what it takes to fight poverty, that this is becoming more a part of mainstream conversations? Yeah,
I would say that during the COVID-19 pandemic, this was a conversation across the country when we saw an expansion of the child tax credit. And there was a study out of Columbia University that showed that there was a drastic drop in the poverty rate for children during that time. When families were getting the expanded child tax credit, and then when it ended, poverty went back up. And so RX Kids leaders and researchers cite that example a lot. And so I think that's been on the forefront of a lot of Americans' minds, is what happens when we give families with kids money and allow them to use that money as they see fit. And I think that spurred a lot of conversation. And what makes this program interesting is that it's targeted, right? So it's not that you're giving money to everyone. It's that you're giving money to a very targeted population. It's it's going to be 60 communities, moms who are either pregnant, mid-pregnancy, and then who have babies, right? So it's a very, relatively speaking, it's a small population that you're providing this cash in hand to.
The money comes from both philanthropy and municipalities,
That's correct.
As you mentioned. When it comes from the government, how is the money being raised?
Yeah, so a big portion is from something called TANF, which is the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families program. That's a federal program. So a big chunk of that comes from Michigan's allocation. And then another portion is general funds from the city of Detroit, for example, right? So communities get to decide what type of funding that they contribute. But of course, there is that private funding that is matched. And that's what makes it universal, allowing families of all incomes to be able to apply.
If some of that money is going from a pipeline that begins with the federal government, are there any concerns about this funding?
Yeah, I think that's always going to be a concern, right? But the TANF program has been around for a while, since the 90s, and there's been a ton of reporting on how that's money has been used in places like Mississippi and even Michigan. And so I think when it comes to like governmental funding, there's always a question around how that's going to be used, and it's going to remain to be seen, like how state lawmakers continue to invest in this type of program.
I'm wondering, given the popularity of this, of RX Kids, have there been instances when a municipality has tried to sign on but hasn't been able to because they couldn't put up the funds to match the philanthropic dollars?
Yeah, I think that would probably be a question for the program administrators. From the reporting I've done, I haven't necessarily seen that to be the case, but municipalities, from my understanding, can raise the money and apply. So there may be programs or like cities and townships out there who are kind of struggling, but that would be a question for the program administrators.
You know so much, though, Nusrat. I expect you to know it all.
Trying my best.
It's The Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent. My guest is Nusrat Rahman. She's the economic mobility reporter at the Detroit Free Press and Bridge Detroit. We're discussing the expansion of a program that gives pregnant moms and new mothers cash and why it's been so impactful and also so popular. Now, RX Kids is open to mothers regardless of income. Mm-hmm. And this is a really interesting part of the program as well. Now, 18% of mothers making $50,000 or more got the money. All other recipients were below that income level. In terms of who you spoke to, what were the impacts for folks who got the money but were already making over $50,000?
Yeah, that's a great question. As you mentioned, it's a relatively smaller portion of people who are above that 50K threshold. So my goal is to be able to talk to moms from across the income spectrum. The moms that I have spoken to, however, are moms who are currently not working, right? So they were I talked to one mom who was a flight attendant on unpaid leave. I talked to another mom who I referenced who thought she was going to get a job and didn't get that job. She was also not working gig jobs. Another mom is a CNA. Her husband is a cook. So these are all working families. These are all working moms. Those are the ones that I was talking to who spoke about the fact that, like, yes, they can make ends meet, but they're struggling, right? It's that little bit that's like, pushing them over the edge. And I think that's representative of so many Americans who are just making enough to like scrape by, but they're still stressed. And so they mentioned how like, yes, I might be working. Yes, I might have some savings or whatever, but like this is helping me get by and pay for the things that I otherwise wouldn't have been able to pay for.
So for you, someone who focuses on economic mobility, it sounds like part of the popularity of this program is a sign of the times, a sign of how difficult it is right now for people to move up the economic ladder.
Yeah, absolutely. And to that point, I'm curious as a reporter to follow the progress of this program, because one of the questions I asked all of the moms is, what are you going to do after this program ends? And the thing that they told me is they were like, I didn't expect this to last forever. Like, I'm grateful for this opportunity, but I'm using this time to prepare for the future. Not everyone has, that opportunity or, to kind of prepare for the future. So that's what they told me. They're like, I know it's not going to last forever, but I'm saving, I'm investing, I'm able to like kind of put this aside for me or my kids. But I have questions around like, what is this going to mean for the kids, right? Like when they're 10, 15, 18 years old, right? What is this going to mean for the moms in the future? So that's something that I'm going to be watching. And it's something that lawmakers have mentioned too. When I talked to them last year about the program as it was like starting in their cities, both Republican and Democrats, they said that they're watching for educational outcomes, for, increase in birth rates, for example, right? And just other outcomes and how it would impact the kids in their communities.
So people are investing a lot of hope into this. I mean, has anyone you've spoken with become, let's say, more of the naysayers? Have they become more open to universal-based programs rather than ones that are very defined, very income restricted because of what they're seeing with RX Kids?
Yeah, I think one note on that, a program like RX Kids is very targeted. So it is universal in the sense that like anyone with any income can apply for it, but it's also very targeted. So it is not necessarily like universal income, for example, or universal basic income. I'm sure we've all heard that term. That's not what this is. This is a very targeted program for moms in certain communities who meet certain requirements. And yes, it is no strings attached, but you do have to live in those communities, right? And you can use the money however you see fit for your family. And so it is a very targeted program. I think what this program has really like shined a light on is like kids. Like what happens when we invest in the youngest kids and moms during pregnancy. And I think that's what it's really shined a light on. And one policy expert that I talked to mentioned, paid leave. Like, will this shine a light on paid leave? A lot of the moms I talked to were not working, right? As they have this money, they're not working. They're looking for jobs, yes. But like, does this shine a spotlight on paid leave, on like pregnancy and working, on the youngest children? That's what I think it's really like exposed more information on.
So it's got the potential to change the conversation. The program has been popular among both Democrats and Republicans. Last year, Metro producer Sam Corey spoke with State Senator John DeMoose, a Republican who represents northern Michigan towns, including Charlevoix, Sheboygan, and Leelanau. Let's listen.
I just absolutely believe that there are a certain number of mothers out there who are not interested in having their babies because they don't think they can afford it, and this money will come in and it'll give them hope and encouragement. I think that's a good thing. And the other reason I did it was based on my faith.
Okay, so Michigan State Senator John DeMoose, he's saying that he changed his mind about RX Kids because he supports mothers and families, and that's an important component of his faith. Did other Republican lawmakers say something similar that you spoke with?
Yeah, I spoke with State Senator Ed McBroom last year as well, and he mentioned that what appealed, the program to him was the idea that this could help increase Michigan's population, right? He's very pro-family, and he mentioned that this is a way to incentivize families and to give them that cushion so they're able to, have more families. And that's something that other folks have mentioned as well. But he also expressed some skepticism. He wanted to kind of see what would happen with the program. And he didn't necessarily align with it being universal in terms of like anyone with any income being able to apply. But he mentioned that what appealed to him was the fact that he's, pro-family. He wants to see Michigan's population increase. But I did talk to other lawmakers as well who are Democrats who mentioned that they're also watching for the outcomes of this program as well.
I'm thinking about another Republican, though, House Speaker Matt Hall, who's critical of RX Kids, and he's a top Republican in the state. What are his biggest qualms with the program?
Right. So earlier this year, he alleged that the program's money from the program was going to non-citizens, and he called it a scam. When RX Kids was announced in Detroit, I asked the administrators of the program, or we asked them, reporters in the room, like, what do you make of that? And what the administrators and Dr. Mona mentioned was the fact that this is a public-private program, and so any non-state dollars would go to families who and babies who don't have legal status. And so I think the public-private nature of this program is what allows them to have that flexibility. So that was their response to the criticism that was fielded by, that lawmaker.
I'm going to ask you for a lot here, Nusrat. I'm wondering, to the best of your knowledge, what would it take to get this program paid for by taxes and embedded as a government program instead of one that's partially funded by philanthropy?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I would obviously defer to people who are experts in I'll take a stab at it from the reporting that I've done. From, my early conversations with the leaders of, the fact that it's public-private allows them to be able to open it up to people regardless of income. If it were to be a governmental program, it would likely have income. If you think about something like SNAP, you need to meet income requirements. If you think about a program like WIC, you need to meet income requirements. Even TANF funding has income requirements. And so if it were to be fully governmental, it would likely have, income requirements like other governmental programs, but the private funding is what allows it to be universal. So that would be a question we could ask, the program administrators, what would it look like for this to be a fully but that's something that I think we should definitely watch for, is what happens to this program 5-10 years down the line, because a lot of the communities have funding for 3 years, right? So at the 3-year mark, we're going to want to ask and be like, hey, what's happening? What's next?
We've talked so much about how impactful RX Kids has been. I want to end asking you if there are any mothers who you spoke with who are potentially worried, who are about to be in bad shape because the cash they're getting is temporary.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's one that I posed to the moms as well. And I asked them, I was like, are you worried? Are you concerned? And they said they're grateful, right? They said that they didn't expect this money to come. And so they're using it for what they need to use it for, like bills, for time to look for jobs, to save that money. And so the main takeaway for them is that they're not concerned. They're just grateful to have that opportunity.
Okay, now I've got a last question for you. I lied before. For you as an economic mobility reporter, what you've been seeing, I mean, you've been studying this program since it came out 2 years ago, and this is your wheelhouse. How significant do you think this program is in this moment?
Yeah, I think affordability is on the minds of every single American. We see it in the headlines every day. This is a cushion for families. Like I mentioned, all of the moms I talked to, I didn't get like a dramatic answer, like this changed my life, right? Like, not that I was looking for that. I was asking them, like, what did this mean for you? And the main takeaway for the moms is that it allowed me to breathe. And families are just struggling to make ends meet. I do think that means something, right? And for me, with my reporter hat on, I'm also going to be skeptical, right? Like, I want to watch for the long-term impacts of this program. And I want to watch for funding, right? Like, yes, this program has a lot of funding from lots of different sources, but how do you make it sustainable, right? Like, what happens 5 years down the line? What happens 10 years down the line? And I wanted to make sure that my reporting is not only rooted in like asking where the money is going, but also rooted in like talking to the moms about what this means for them.
Thank you for your skeptical reporter's hat. We always want you to be wearing that. Nusrat Rahman is the economic mobility reporter at the Detroit Free Press and Bridge Detroit. Nusrat, thank you so much for joining me on the Metro.
Thank you so much.
It's the Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent. Coming up next, it is Mental Health Month, the month of May, and we're asking, why is it so hard to find a good, affordable therapist? My next guest says private equity is to blame. We'll find out more next right here on the Metro. Stay with us.